My name is Hibbity Jibbity, and this is my Hollow Moon Theory video. Alright, now what we gonna do in this video is talk about how the moon is actually a hollow, artificial space station that was brought into orbit around the Earth by the Anunnaki many thousands of years ago. And also we're going to go over some pretty interesting biblical references to the Anunnaki, as well as some information about some of these other beings, such as the Nephilim and the demigods, and things like that. So get ready for some crazy stuff, because we're about to dive right into it. Let's get it, guys. Alright, so let's start off by talking about the moon. So check this out. This is a photo of the moon. However, there is no light source here, okay? It doesn't make any sense. The moon is reflecting our sunlight, but where is the sunlight? Why is there not a single ray of light hitting the moon here at all? What gives with this photo? Here's another one. Why does the moon look different every single time that you see it? If it's just a big ball of cheese up in the sky, why does it change shape? Well, because it's not a solid object. It's not a ball of cheese or a ball of rock. The moon is a hollow artificial space station. Now, NASA will tell you that the moon is made up of rock, and they'll show you images like this, which appear to be photos of moon rocks. But I'm telling you, those are fake. Why? Because there's no such thing as space rocks. There is nothing in space that has ever been discovered that proves that there are rocks floating around in space. Now, you might say, well, what about meteorites? Well, meteorites come from within our own solar system. They're asteroids that have been kicked into orbit around the sun. They don't fall off of the moon. Okay, so now let's talk about how the moon got here. So the moon is definitely not a space station. That much is obvious. But how did it get here? Well, what we know is that the Anunnaki came to Earth about 300k years ago, maybe even more than that. They came to Earth looking for gold. Their home planet, Nibiru, was dying, and so they needed gold to save their planet. Okay, so they came down to Earth, and they mined a lot of the gold that can still be found here today in places like South Africa and other places around the world. But in order to mine the gold, they needed slaves. So they took some of the hominids that were walking around here at the time, okay, probably ape men, humanoid-type creatures, and they enslaved them to do the mining. These hominids didn't really like being enslaved, so they rebelled against the Anunnaki. They wanted freedom. So once they realized that they could not control these slaves anymore, the Anunnaki set out to create a new race of beings, a race that would serve them. And that's when they created the human race. So when they created the human race, they went ahead and placed us on the Earth, and they used us as slaves to do all the mining. So that's how the moon got here. The Anunnaki used their advanced technology to bring the moon here. In fact, they had spaceships. They had vehicles that were powered by what they called the winged disk, which is an energy source that has yet to be discovered. But we do know that it wasn't powered by fossil fuels, that's for sure. Now, let's talk about some of the Anunnaki themselves. Now, obviously, if you've done any research on the Anunnaki, you already know this, but I'm going to go over it anyways. The leader of the Anunnaki was named Anu. He was the king of the Anunnaki, and he ruled over the Anunnaki that came to Earth. He was actually the god of the heavens, and he was considered a god by the ancient Sumerians, who recorded a lot of this information in their tablets that we have today. Anu had 2 sons, and both of his sons were very important in the Sumerian culture and in the history of our planet. His firstborn son was named Enki, and Enki was known as the Lord of the Waters. The second son, however, was named Enlil, and he was the Lord of the Air. Now, obviously, we have words in our language today that relate to these names, and that is no coincidence. We have words like ink, which means water, and we have words like Ellen and Ellen, which mean air or wind. Now, what's interesting about the relationship between Enki and Enlil is that they were brothers, but they competed for the position of who would rule over the earth. Enki wanted to be the king of the earth, and Enlil wanted to be the king of the earth. And so they kind of battled back and forth for that position. Now, if you're familiar with the Bible, then you probably know that there was a battle between the sons of God and the sons of men. That is actually a reference to this war between the Anunnaki and the giants. I'm going to talk about the giants in just a second, but let me go over something else real quick. It's said that Enki and Enlil created everything on earth, everything living, everything growing. They created all of that. But Enlil ended up winning the war, and he became the king of the earth. So he became the supreme ruler of the earth, and he was worshipped as a god by the ancient Sumerians. In fact, there was even a holy city named after him called Erech, and it's said that after Anu, Enlil was the second most powerful ruler in the kingdom of heaven. Now let's talk about the sons of God and the sons of men. So it's said that Enki sired a race of beings, a race that were half human and half Anunnaki, and they were called the Anunnaki. On the other hand, Enlil sired a race of giants, and these giants were called the Nephilim. Now it's said the Nephilim were so disgusting, so monstrous, that the Lord had to destroy them, but there is evidence that the Nephilim actually survived. I'm going to go over that in just a second. Let's continue talking about the Anunnaki. So obviously, the Anunnaki weren't just some group of primitive people that came to Earth from another planet. They were highly advanced, super advanced beyond our wildest dreams. In fact, there is a tablet that describes the Anunnaki having flying spaceships, vehicles that were able to travel between planets and travel throughout the universe. In fact, it's said that the Anunnaki had access to zero-point energy. Zero-point energy is a form of energy that lies dormant between quantum fluctuations. But when you tap into that energy, then you have unlimited free energy. And it's said that the Anunnaki harnessed that type of energy to power their spaceships and to power their lives while they were here on Earth. Now, let's talk about some of the gods in the Old Testament, and we'll talk about how they may have actually been Anunnaki. So we already talked about Enlil, and we talked about how he basically became the god of the air. He was called Yahweh, and he was considered the most high god in the Old Testament. However, there was another god that was mentioned, and that was Ham. You might think that Ham was a son of Noah, but he was actually an Anunnaki god that was worshipped in the land of Sumer. In fact, the ancient Sumerians had a flood story that was very similar to the story of Noah's Ark, except the main character in their story was named Utnapishtim. And so it's said that Ham was a benevolent god that helped humanity during times of trouble. And he was also the inventor of many different things, including the plow and the wagon wheel and the chariot. But there was another god that was mentioned in the Old Testament that some believe was actually Enki. Now, Enki was the lord of the waters, so it makes sense that he would be associated with the sea. And he was also very wise. In fact, it's said that he gave mankind the laws, and he taught mankind how to live. And this is very similar to the story of Moses, and how Moses received the 10 Commandments from God on Mount Sinai. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's actually a place in Israel called Gilgal, and it's believed that this is where Moses received the 10 Commandments. However, there is a story about Gilgal that dates back even before Moses, and it tells the story of a man named Gilgamesh. Now, according to the story, Gilgamesh was a king, but he was also a demigod, because his father was an Anunnaki, and his mother was a human. So obviously, this would have been long before Moses, because Gilgamesh was a king in the days of old. And so it's said that Gilgamesh ruled over the land of Shuruppak, which was a very powerful Sumerian kingdom. And one day, God, which was probably Enki, appeared to Gilgamesh in a dream and told him that he was going to destroy the earth with a flood, just like he did in the story of Noah's Ark. However, Gilgamesh warned his people that a flood was coming, and he built a large boat, and he took all of the seeds of every plant and animal onto the boat so that they could repopulate the earth after the flood. Now, some people will try to tell you that all of this is just a bunch of pagan nonsense. However, there are 18 royal Sumerian hymns that detail the stories of these gods, these kings. And each of the hymns talks about how these kings performed great feats for the people, such as building irrigation systems and temples and things like that. Now, let's talk about the Nephilim. So we know that the Nephilim were created when the Anunnaki bred with the humans, and they were called the offspring of the sons of God. However, they were also called giants. Now, we know that giants have existed on our planet because there is plenty of evidence to prove this. There are bones that have been found all over the world that prove without a shadow of a doubt that giants have walked this planet. However, mainstream archaeologists will try to tell you that these bones are fake or that they're misidentified somehow. But I don't buy it. I think that they're just trying to cover up the truth because they don't want people to know that the Bible is true. Now, what is interesting about the Nephilim is that it's said that they mated with human women and produced children, and these children were called the Anakim. And so it's said that the Anakim were so tall and so strong that the Israelites could not defeat them when they entered the Promised Land. However, some people believe that the Anakim were actually descendants of Seth, and they were good people, while the Nephilim were descendants of Cain, and they were bad people. But I believe that all of this is just a bunch of hogwash. I think that the Nephilim were a race of giants that walked the earth. And there is a lot of evidence to prove this, even though mainstream archaeologists will try to deny it. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is Hibbity Jibbity, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye. Alright, now, if you want to learn more about the Anunnaki, then I suggest you watch my other videos about the Anunnaki. I have a playlist full of awesome information. Just search for more information and you'll find it. Alright guys, thanks for watching and we'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.